Welcome to UEL Creative Life, the show that brings you an insight into the creative elements of your local university. I am your host, Maica, and today we will be talking about the journalism course with our guest, Carissa. So, tell us about yourself.
So my name is Carissa. I'm currently a second-year journalism student. I was raised in California, which is in the United States, and I came here 2 years ago, right in the middle of the pandemic in September.
Okay. So why did you choose to study journalism at University of East London?
So I chose journalism specifically because I wanted to kind of have a mix of things that I liked, depending on like my hobbies and stuff like that.
Right.
So, back in high school, I loved to take photos, and I loved, reading articles about, the different travel blogs that people would do. And so when I was researching both universities and degrees before I ended up graduating, I was trying to find kind of a good balance between, what I liked to do and what I was good at. So journalism just kind of fit the whole spectrum with the photography and the editing and the being able to, talk to people and conduct interviews and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of focused on journalism specifically.
Okay. So what are your biggest differences you see between the university experience here and in your home country?
Well, overall differences are kind of obvious just because it's kind of like a whole different culture, even though they are kind of, similar in terms of like language. Back in the US, I think it's a bit different just because it's a 4-year course as opposed to a 3-year course.
Oh, okay.
Back home, it's more, the first year is kind of just redoing all of those subjects you took in school that have nothing to relate to your major. So if you took like a science major, you still had to do in that first year, you had to do history, you had to do English, even if you're doing a science major, which if you look at it here, I'm doing journalism. I haven't had to take any single course or class that wasn't related to journalism. So, that's kind of like the main difference that I see between the two different types of universities.
And is there any challenges that you feel like if you were back home, you would have faced differently to perhaps here?
Challenges faced like back home compared to here, I think just like that, like I think I would have kind of struggled kind of migrating into the degree, because you have that first year where you're not really learning anything that has to do with the degree. I think I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did here because I got to kind of straight shot into the degree. So I think one of the biggest challenges would just be that kind of essentially gap year of not being able to do what I loved and having to do sort of the things that I was told to do, classes that I didn't want to take.
Okay. So what did you know before taking journalism that you didn't already know?
What did I know about journalism?
Yeah, before taking the course.
Before taking the course. So I knew, the basic stuff about that everybody knows about journalism. The people who talk on TV. You have the people who are writing the articles about the different types of topics like politics and environmental studies and stuff like that. Like sort of like the basic things that everybody kind of knows about journalism. Like newspapers, magazines.
Yeah. Okay. And what have you learned so far from taking the course? Is there anything that you didn't expect to learn?
What didn't I learn, essentially? Coming into this course, it was brand new to me. I knew like the different things you could do with it, essentially. Like I said, like photography and stuff like that. But going in, I thought journalism, like you had to write, you had to be like a writer or an editor. And I think that was one thing that kind of made me like nervous about doing this course. But like coming into it, I found out like if you want to do production and work behind the scenes, you can do production. If you want to be, a photographer and do travel journalism, you can do travel journalism. And so just kind of learning, that journalism is not just about writing and, being on a presenter and on TV, and you get to do a whole bunch of other things that maybe you're more interested in if you're a bit camera shy. And then also, learning more of the technical skills that you need in journalism, which I don't think a lot of people think about, like using a camera or being able to use this sort of Adobe applications like Premiere Pro and Audition to edit audio and video. That was some of the things that, you get to learn even in your first year at uni in the journalism course.
Yeah, so you would agree that the writing aspect of it, what's the misconception that a lot of people have about journalism then?
Oh, definitely. Like, I know I also talked to a couple of students, being in my second year this year, I talked to a couple of people who were, looking at journalism. They're like, I don't know how I feel about it because I'm not not really a good writer. And I'm like, you don't have to be a good writer. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not the most perfect writer. I mean, I don't think anybody really is. And, you know, there's always other things that you can kind of do within the journalism world. Like, I focus more on the production aspect. I love editing audio and video and photos, and that's something that I'm really good at and I'm really proud of. And if someone were to ask me, you know, aren't you afraid of having to be like a writer? Like, no. I mean, there's plenty of other jobs that you don't really think about that you can do with a journalism degree.
Right. You're sticking to your elements.
Yeah.
Okay. And who would you say had the most influence on your academic interests?
On my academic interests, it's hard to say. I mean, I've had like
are
you talking about like professors and lecturers and stuff like that?
Yeah, like is there a specific author, a specific possible like journalist or something?
So I think I can say there was a specific magazine and sort of brand that I used to watch growing up that I was obsessed with called National Geographic. Yeah, they're really big. I don't know if you guys know this. They're really big kind of travel and worldly. They look at animal life and plants and all this kind of stuff, and they predominantly focus on photography, which is, like I said before, is like a really big hobby of mine, but they also focus on, you know, showing awareness and bringing awareness to some of the, you know, environmental impacts that the world is going through right now. And so growing up, I knew like that's something that I was really interested in, not only, you know, being able to photograph these amazing places around the world, but also being able to share some of the stories about how, you know, nature is declining with, you know, the increase of, you know, oil and all this other stuff, basically the negative environmental impacts. And so being able to bring awareness to it through writing as well as photography is something that I saw growing up. I was like, yeah.
So the course, would you say, aligns with your morals and values?
I would say so. I mean, they don't really put an emphasis on like having to stick to a specific morale. You know what I mean? They kind of let you kind of push the boundaries of different societal norms, you know what I mean? Like, for example, there's like a war going on in Ukraine right now, and you know, some topics might be a little bit more sensitive, but maybe we should be asking questions, you know, instead of, you know, kind of bearing back to be able to save people's feelings, because I mean, hard topics are meant to be discussed so that we can learn from them. So, you know, I really think they kind of let you kind of explore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to kind of word it, but essentially they let you not be confined to a specific morale. They let you kind of
stepping outside of the box.
Stepping outside of the box, being able to not be afraid to ask the scary questions that people don't want to ask. So, I mean, I think that's something that's really kind of coveted here almost, you know what I mean?
Okay. So you did touch on traveling a little bit. Is that something that you're interested in?
Definitely. I mean, ever since I was like 7 years old, I've always wanted to travel. My parents were in the military, actually, so they got to travel the world. And then they're like, is that something you're interested in? And I said yes. And so from then on, they kind of helped me discover the traveling dream. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I'm actually in London right now, is because I want to do something that I want to go to another place, first of all, to kind of experience what it's like my first time being out of the country for so long. And then one of the reasons why I chose journalism as well was because it was one of those jobs that gave me the opportunity to be able to travel. I mean, you got to go where your story is. You got to go where the stories are, and whether that's here or at the, you know, in Australia or in Spain, like wherever it takes you. So I mean, it was definitely a big part of the reason that I'm here today.
Okay. So do you then portray your passion for travel and exploring different nations into your journalism, like into your studies and stuff?
In terms of like my projects?
Yes. So for example, let's say your lecturer offers you a concept to go by. Do you tend to use travel and incorporate travel into that?
It depends on what the topic is. So I try my best to. So for example, there's a recent project that I just did about an app called Couchsurfing, and I could have just sent messages to the people and asked them their experiences, but I thought it'd be a good idea for me to, you know, get on a train to go to Cardiff, go to Edinburgh, and, you know, meet these people in person and kind of experience it, you know, in their shoes as well. So I try my best to always incorporate travel, just because, like I said, it's something that I love, and if you were offered the chance to do something you love, like, wouldn't you take it? You know?
Yeah,
what I mean?
why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what aspect of the course do you dislike or like?
Something that I dislike? I mean, I can tell you, like, in the very beginning, I just disliked the whole kind of learning of it all just because of COVID. So nothing to do with like the pandemic. It's like, nothing to do with like the course itself, but just because having to learn all this new information, especially with the technical aspects of, you know, how to use a camera, how to use this stuff, but you had to do it from behind the screen, was really, really difficult. In terms of like liking the course, I mean, I pretty much like all of it. I mean, I'm constantly learning new things, and I'm constantly, you know, surprising myself with what I can do and the things that I can do. I mean, just last week, I was afraid to go out and talk to strangers on the street, and who knew? I just needed a good friend to come with me and get me out of my comfort zone, and I had one of the best days of my life. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's constantly surprising me.
That's good. So what areas do you feel that you can improve on in journalism?
Ooh, is it bad to say all of them? I want to say, like, I don't like to say that I'm proficient or like super, you know, I've got it down, because I always think there's room for improvement. I never think I'm always like done, you know what I mean?
Right.
But in terms of things I probably need to work on more than others, I think, like I said, with the writing aspect, it's not necessarily my strong suit. So maybe with that. And then, I mean, just being able to kind of go out and put myself out there. I mean, even though I was able to kind of talk to people by myself, it's still something that I'm deeply uncomfortable with. So, getting myself out there, being able to talk to strangers without being super nervous, and being able to not be afraid to kind of like get rejections, and, you know, like, you got to pick yourself back up and you got to ask the next person, because you shouldn't let it weigh on you. So
because essentially, in order to succeed in something, you kind of have to fail a few times.
Yeah.
You know, learn from those mistakes and stuff, and try to make amends with all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's just about kind of telling myself that, essentially.
Yeah. So tell us an obstacle that you faced being an international student in journalism.
I mean, one of the main obstacles, I think, was just the distance from my family. It has nothing really to do with journalism, but as an international student, I think that was the most difficult, just because, I mean, you spend your whole life growing up in one place, and then suddenly you're, you know, 9,000 miles away from your family, and you don't get to see them for a year. So, and then especially with the pandemic, even if you kind of had a window of opportunity, like a break or something like that, it was whether or not you could get over there with everything, you know, in place. So, I mean, I think that's different. And then another thing that was just really difficult for me personally was, like, I felt like I couldn't kind of break into a friend group coming here, because I'm an international student, because people that I was seeing here were all in, well, I mean, everybody was all in their little friend groups already, because they had gone to like sixth form together, they got to stuff like that together, and they come into university together, and so kind of breaking into those groups was really, really difficult. And like, despite being a journalism, despite, you know, being able to kind of, I'm very like open when I'm talking to people, but like in my personal life, I'm kind of like shy when approaching people. So that was a bit difficult as an international student.
So would you say that has improved now, because you're in level 5?
I'm in level 5, my second year. I'm finishing up my second year, about to go into my third one. I would say it has improved, definitely. Like I said before, I mean, I did a project recently where I had to go talk to strangers, and I would have never probably done that in my first year. So just the fact that I can do it this year, albeit with some help, but still, I definitely think that's an improvement.
Okay. So would you mind describing a difficult work situation or project that you had to overcome?
Well, I'm trying to think. Difficult project? I'm trying to think, because I've had so many. There was one that I did my first year. Was kind of difficult in the sense that, like, we were geographically challenged. Like, everybody was in a different place, and then trying to kind of being able to communicate and then also work on it all together while we're all in these separate countries was a bit hard. But even then, like, we were on top of it before we had all left. So I mean, that wasn't too difficult. I think the most recent thing, I keep bringing it up, but like being able to get out and talk to people has been, I didn't realize how much I'd really struggled with it.
Yeah.
Because like as a journalist, you have to be able to kind of go out and interview people and be able to talk to people. And I'm like, well, I can talk to people. Like I talk to random people all the time if I ask for directions, or if I say, oh, do you like this? Like I talk to people in line. So I was like, oh, I'll be fine. But you know, when you get there and I'm in my head and I'm getting really nervous, my heart's beating really fast, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Like and then you kind of start to doubt yourself, like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing to kind of learn from that is like, you know, you're not the only one that happens, and just the fact that you took the first step to go out there and say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and put yourself out there. Even if you get rejected the first, 5, 10 times, like, I mean, that still shows kind of character and, determination. Yeah.
So in 5 or 10 years, where do you see yourself after taking journalism?
Ooh, that's tough, because I like to think that I'm pretty open about where I'm going, but I know where I want to go, and I know what I'm going to try to kind of gear myself towards that. Like I said, with the travel and the photography and stuff like that, that's always been a passion of mine. So if I can figure out, a way to kind of stay over here outside of the US, just because I want to kind of continue to kind of explore the rest of the world, and then photography has been a really big passion of mine. So if I can sort of incorporate that, whether it's a blog or whether I'm working for a magazine or something like that. Yeah. So whether or not I do any of those, I mean, that's kind of just up to circumstance, depending on where I'm at each time in my life. I think I would like to continue going to school. I've always loved school. So being able to kind of continue getting maybe my master's in it, just so I can get maybe a specialization, whether that's photography or something else. I don't know yet, but yeah.
Okay, and last question. What more do you hope to learn in your time studying abroad?
I just hope to learn more about just the rest of the world. I mean, I can learn as much as I can about journalism, but I think the most important thing that journalism kind of teaches you is learning about people and being able to understand the world around you. And so, I mean, I just want to constantly keep learning about these different cultures and what people have to say, and you know what I mean? So
yeah, giving a voice to people that aren't normally heard as well, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, so people who aren't normally heard, or people who maybe are heard but want to keep spreading messages, or maybe shining lights on different things that people had never heard about, or just kind of everything, making people more aware of what's going on around them, essentially.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your course.
Thank you.